masochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Surber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Surber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
I couldn't stand him. I thought he was a nut. And once I read the Bible for myself, I'm able to accept the truth now.
All right.
And it doesn't make me angry.
I'm talking about the Lauren Hardy show on Wednesday. Don't worry about them. Some of y'all, get off of it, would you? Don't dare do that again. Shut that up. Shut that up. Shut that up.
As your pastor, I am telling you, please, don't waste your time on Wednesday nights watching this television program.
If you're looking for Laurel and Hardy, I left my derby and I left my cane, but I did bring my Bible. If you'll read along with me, you'll find that the persons who are making the accusations, they're really the ones who have a problem. I hear them telling you to shut up, that you're going to be embarrassed, and I even hear them flat out saying, I'm telling you what to do as a pastor. Give me a chance and I'll give you what does the Bible say. Always ask for, what does the Bible say? Get it right here on Star News.
New time, Thursday nights at 9 o'clock.
Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Surber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Surber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
The views expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect the views of the station, its employees, or ownership.
Thanks for joining me tonight. I'm Johnny Robertson, and we're here on What Does the Bible Say? We have a special edition for you tonight. We are actually going to be involved in the much publicized discussion between myself and Larry Surber, and we're very thankful that Larry's here with us tonight. He's going to be coming on momentarily. We're going to let him take off on the first speech tonight. If you haven't already told somebody, we hope that you will, that you'll tell a friend that the debate is on and the discussion is on. I think it's going to be very, very interesting. This is really what our world really is involved in right now. I think a cultural revolution having to do with what's going to end up being the future of the world, and we live in a different world now. I mean, people can be watching us overseas right now, and it's not costing them anything, and things can happen overseas, and we know it over here, and so our world is really, really changing, and I think that this is a very pertinent discussion that we're having tonight, and I really want to say thank you to Larry before he comes on for being with us. We're on first name basis. I'm just Johnny, he's Larry, and we're both just men, and we're trying to figure out what is the real answer to the situation we're in here in this world. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to our commercial and give you a chance to call a friend, get your popcorn, whatever, and get settled, and Larry will be on the show ready to take on his first speech. Stay with us.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Surber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Surber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it. Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Surber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Surber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it. Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Surber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Surber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
Good evening. I'm Larry Surber. I want to thank Johnny for having me on tonight. I've been watching the commercial. I didn't have anything to do with the production of that commercial, but I noticed that it said I was a disciple of Richard Dawkins. At first I was a little confused because I'd only heard of disciples being guys that follow a guy around like Jesus' disciples. But I looked it up in the Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary, and it's appropriate. A disciple is someone who admires someone, who is a fan of them, and who tries to proselytize or spread their ideas around. So I am truly a fan of Richard Dawkins. I think he's one of the most brilliant scientists in the world today. I think he explains complex things very clearly. Anyway, we are here tonight to talk about two different worldviews. My view is the view of pure hard science. Johnny's view is the view of Jesus, God, the Bible. I say there's no way the two can get along because science is about reality, things we can prove and test and measure and feel and see. I say that religion and the Bible is a great deal about things that are not real. We all know the story of Cinderella. She had a fairy godmother. When her fairy godmother wanted to make a coach for Cinderella to go to the ball, she took her magic wand and waved it, and suddenly, poof, alakazam, a pumpkin, just an organic object, a pumpkin, turned into a complex coach made of steel and leather and wood and brass. It was an artifact. I don't believe things happen like that in the real world. I really don't. And I think this is the fundamental difference between a scientist like me and a religious person. Now, what is reality? According to my definition, reality is things we can see, hear, touch, taste, smell, things made of atoms and molecules we can verify. But it's also things like thoughts and emotions, love, hate, fear, joy. We can't see and touch those things, but they are very real. We can sense them, not with our five senses, but with our subjective sense. But, and this is the most important thing so far, there are no emotions without a brain. Let me say that again. There are no emotions, there's no thinking without a brain. Those things do not exist unless a brain exists. And so that's why I would say when you die, you don't go to heaven or hell. I have no doubt that when you die, you cease to exist because you are developed in your brain day by day by your information you take in about the world around you through your five senses. You also stir those things up in your brain by analyzing them. You worry about things, you have hopes and fantasies about things, and all that is you. As I say, day by day, from the moment you were born, you keep developing. You're not the same today as you were yesterday. And when you die and your brain disassembles, I don't think there's any doubt that you feel just like you did 800 years ago. In other words, you don't feel at all because you don't exist. My mother died several years ago, and sadly, before she died, she had 2 or 3 years of where she was losing her mind. She had dementia. Dementia is an injury to the brain. It's lesions on the brain. Lesions are just injuries to the brain. Her particular injuries were amyloid plaques and stray twisted proteins in certain spots of the brain. And as these things worked on her brain, she began to lose bits of her personality. I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but you cannot be a sane person living in the moment unless you also have memories of the past and anticipation of the future. And with my mother's condition, the parts of her brain that were injured were erasing the part of her that could remember the past and anticipate the future. So sadly, she was beginning to disappear. In the real world, not the world of fairy godmothers and magic wands, in the real world, things happen gradually. Complex things like Cinderella's coach don't just happen instantly out of a pumpkin. And I would say that applies to the human being. In the Genesis story, God takes some clay or dust or something and breathes on it and makes a man. And the man comes up instantly. Instantly. And the man has 1 trillion cells. I had a picture of a human cell. I don't know if Scotty could show that. There it is. This is one, let me move out of the way. This is one human cell. It's quite complicated. It has a nucleus. It has mitochondria for making energy and many other parts. That's just one cell. I say things in nature happen slowly, bit by bit. You don't build a brick wall without building a brick. You build bricks, then you build a brick wall, and I think that's the way nature operates. Not suddenly, not instantly. I don't think you can blow on dust. Besides, I'd like to know the mechanics of how a God who's not even made of matter, who's a pure spirit, can transfer energy to air to blow on dust. I want to know the mechanism. And this is where I'm coming from. Johnny and I talked the other day about the old ladies that say they can talk the fire out of a burn. I think that's very silly. I know many people around here believe it. But my question is, by what mechanism? How does your talking, your vibrating air of your vocal cords, how does that connect with the skin cells, the platelets, and the white cells in an injured person's burned skin? How does that heal it up? I'd like to see that. I want to know that mechanism. Johnny agreed with me about that one. But it's a little awkward for Johnny when we come to Moses and the brass serpent. God told Moses to fashion a fiery snake of brass. Well, what is brass? Most of you probably know that brass is just a mixture of copper and zinc. It's not even a chemical compound. It's just a mixture. You melt some copper and you melt some zinc and you mix it up and you've got brass. Well, what is snake venom? Snake venom, you have hemotoxins, which are blood poisons. You have neurotoxins, which paralyze the nerves and stop the heart. What I want to know from Johnny and the rest of you people out there that go to church and are religious, how does looking, just gazing upon a brass snake, do what God told Moses it would do? God said, if people look upon this brass snake, and if they are bitten by a real snake, they won't die. That's, again, the mechanism. Speaking of mechanisms, how does your car work? How does the engine work? Well, I can give you a real simple explanation. Think of a cannon like the cannons that were used in the Civil War. You got a barrel, you got a cannonball with some powder behind it, and you got a fuse. You light the fuse, the powder explodes, it blows the cannonball down the barrel. Well, how does your car engine work? In very, very simple terms, you've got a cylinder like the cannon barrel, you've got a piston, which is like the cannonball, you've got a spark plug, which is like the fuse, and you've got a mixture of gasoline and air, which is like the powder, the gunpowder. So you set it off, that piston doesn't blow out of the end of the cylinder like the cannonball out of the barrel, it's connected to a crank, just like the crank on an old classroom pencil sharpener. It turns that crank. That propels your car down the road. Now, if I took that engine out and melted it, poured it into a mold and had just a block of steel and aluminum, put it back where the engine was, I don't care how strong your faith is, people. You'd be stupid to think you could turn the key and drive down the road with that block in place of the engine, because the mechanism, that piston turning with the explosions that propels your wheels, is gone. So as I said, this is where I'm coming from. As a scientist, I want to see the mechanisms. I just want to see what's going on there. There's a story in the Bible where Jesus turns water to wine. Oh,
Scott, if you'll run a commercial.
Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Surber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Surber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
Folks, I just could not resist putting up that scenario in front of you. Larry, even though I consider him to be a good friend, a potential very good friend, and I would like to see him one day possibly even be a helper in the cause that we're in, but I have to say that he, along with John Lennon, is a dreamer. And what you just saw was the collision of two fools, really, John Lennon and Stalin. That was a clip from the movie Enemy at the Gate, and you saw them. They were engaged in a war that was the result of a person who shares the same view in one sense. I would never consider Larry to be like Stalin, but they're both atheists. And John Lennon is an individual who says, imagine a world with no religion, no heaven, and no hell. Well, we just saw that world. They were fighting it out there in that world. And he said, imagine where there was no country. And there's always going to be sides. And this evening we are in one of the most important discussions that we will have. The higher learning facilities, all of the colleges, people at the PhD level, they're all controlled by persons who are atheist or agnostic. Even Richard Dawkins, depending on which time you hear him, he describes himself on a scale of 1 to 7, 7 being a complete atheist who believes there is no possibility of God. He describes himself in the Pell debate as a person on the scale of number 6, that he leaves room just because he said no person who really is a scientist would ever claim that he could know that there absolutely is no God, even anymore, as Richard Dawkins said, than he could prove there isn't an Easter bunny. He said some things are just, he said it makes no sense to go ahead and say that these are beyond the possibility. So that's what we're saying tonight. Individuals in our school system, public school system, they are controlled by persons who are teaching evolution. Many of them are atheists and don't believe in any kind of design as far as the world is concerned. And we're saying tonight that where we came from is very important, because where we came from ultimately is the deciding factor in where we go. If, as Larry says, that we go to the grave, our brains rot, whether, what happens to you when you die, as Richard Dawkins says, has to do with whether you're buried, cremated, or what happens to you, in that sense. Or is there something more than what we actually are involved here in this world? And so that is really the basis of our discussion tonight. I think, even though I have things planned to present, I want to answer Larry's illustration about Cinderella. Oftentimes individuals present just a very, I don't want to speak to Larry, more to Richard Dawkins, about an elite view of the scientific position as if it is, so much better than the position having to do with persons who believe in the Bible. And he brought up Cinderella and how that this beautiful carriage just poof out of nothing. I'd like to listen to Richard Dawkins in his April 15th debate in Australia. Listen to this question that came in via the video.
From nothing.
Mr. Dawkins.
Well, obviously you're not a physicist, and nor am I. And I am delighted to say that during my time in Australia, I shall be having a number of conversations, public conversations, with my colleague Lawrence Krauss, including one in the Sydney Opera House. Later, I think it's next week. And he's written a book on exactly that topic of how you can get something from nothing, and I shall be questioning him about that. Of course it's counterintuitive that you can get something from nothing. Of course common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. That's why it's interesting. It's got to be interesting in order to give rise to the universe at all. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. Now, if you want to replace a physical explanation by an intelligent God, that's an even worse explanation. It's an even more difficult explanation. What scientists are trying to do is to explain how you can get not just something, but the immense complexity of the world, of the universe, and of life. And science is making a pretty good fist of doing that. Life is now completely solved, barring the details. That was Darwin's contribution and Darwin's successors. Physicists are still working on the origin of the cosmos. Among them is Lawrence Krauss, whom I shall be talking to next week. Now, it is very mysterious how the universe came into being. It's a deeply mysterious and interesting question.
And can I just interrupt? It's an old question, a very old question. Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century was asking the same question. He said there must have been a time when no physical things existed, but something can't come from nothing. That was his view. It's just repeated by us.
Something can come from nothing, and that's what physicists are now telling us. I could give you asked me to give you a layman's interpretation. It would be a very, very layman's interpretation. When you have matter and antimatter and you put them together, they cancel each other out and give rise to nothing. What Lawrence Krauss is now suggesting is that if you start with nothing, the process can go into reverse and produce matter and antimatter. The theory is still being worked out. It's a very difficult theory, mathematical theory. I'm not qualified to answer the question, but what I am sure about is that it most certainly is not solved by postulating an intelligence, a creative intelligence, who raises even bigger questions of his own existence. That certainly is not going to be the answer, whatever else is.
George Bell.
Thank you. The trouble, well, there are many troubles with Richard's teachings, but a fundamental one is that he dumbs down God and he soups up nothing.
Now, that's my exact point tonight. That's exactly what Larry did, is he made a big argument out of us believing in things from the Bible that talk about a God that isn't visible, and he then made that into a scenario with Cinderella. Poof, out of nothing. But his idol just sat right there and said, I'm going around the country in Australia and I'm going to discuss how that something came from nothing. And then he went on to put it into layman's terms and talked about antimatter mixing with matter, and then you turn it in reverse, and so you end up having nothing all the way around. And he made it sound smart. But really what you just said is nothing came from nothing, any way you slice it. And so I don't really see how that is any more scientific or smarter than the position that we're holding. Okay, we'll go to our commercial, and Larry will come back in.
Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Surber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Surber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
Countdown.
Okay. I was watching that when Johnny was playing John Lennon's song, Imagine. Love that song, by the way. Imagine there are no countries. Imagine there's no heaven. I just love that. But I noticed, I believe, he was talking about Stalin, who was an atheist, and he did murder millions of people. I'm sorry to have him be an atheist. That kind of hurts me. But I believe I saw some Nazi insignia there, too, did I not? Nazis, you know, were Germany, Hitler's soldiers. And I know a lot of preachers believe or want to believe that Hitler was an atheist. Oh, no, my friend. Hitler was a devout Catholic. The Pope and the Vatican supported Hitler during the 30s. They never excommunicated him. And my thing is this. Johnny has said to me before that he did not like Hitler. But I want to know why. Because according to Johnny's worldview, every one of those 6 million Jews that Hitler destroyed are burning, popping, cracking in hell right now. Because they were Jews. They didn't believe in the church you read about in the Bible. Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it, and all that. I would like to go back to what I was about to say when my time ran out. That another example of mechanisms. Jesus turned water to wine. I know that water is just hydrogen atoms, the simplest atoms in the universe, and oxygen atoms combined in molecules. 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen makes a water molecule. I have never seen a preacher describe the mechanism by how Jesus took ordinary water and turned it into wine, which contains C12H22O11, which is sugar, several different kinds of sugars, as a matter of fact, several starches, tannins, pectins, and if it's fermented wine, the get you drunk kind of wine, it's got alcohol, maybe 2 or 3 kinds of grain alcohol. How did Jesus... Johnny's just complaining that Richard Dawkins is saying, well, nothing came from nothing, and that's all very speculative and very abstract. But Jesus clearly turned water right in front of these people to wine. Another thing, I've heard the Church of Christ preachers, some of those people that were up here from the tent talking about the water to wine and about wine in general, saying that Jesus and them didn't drink fermented wine. But as a little thing there that I noticed, in Roman times, there was a saying, you give your best wine when your guests arrive. If you're a host, you give your best wine, and then later, after they're a little bit sloshed, you give them the rot gut, and they won't know the difference. Well, in that little story about Jesus turning water to wine, the man says, unlike other people, you saved your best wine for later. That indicates to me that there's a possibility maybe it was that old get-you-drunk wine. I don't know. But anyway, I wanted to finish up on that, and I'd like to say this. Johnny has taken a few things there about Richard Dawkins. If I didn't see any more about him than that, I wouldn't, know too much either. But the commercial, where he's talking about the God of the Old Testament as a racist and homophobic and megalomaniacal and all misogynistic. I think all those things are true. You don't have to look far in the Bible to see a vicious, bloodthirsty God. Didn't God tell Moses to destroy the Midianites and destroy the grown people and destroy the women who were not virgins and even destroy the little boys and save for themselves the little virginal girls? What kind of a God is going to order his people, the chosen people, to commit murder, genocide, bring people into slavery, and of all things, tell them to child rape? Take these young girls for your own pleasure. And so a lot of those things Richard Dawkins is saying, I think, are quite true. The God of the Old Testament seems to treat women as second-class citizens. Johnny thinks that we're living in some terrible times where we're getting away from the Bible, but let's go back. For most of human history, women were nothing but just a slave to a man to have a baby every year until they couldn't have them anymore or died. People killed black people with impunity, weren't punished for it. I'd much rather live today, folks, and you would too, because you got Novocaine when you have to have your teeth worked on. You got air conditioning in the 102-degree summer days like we had. I don't want to go back to the old days when Charles Darwin had not come along and so forth. Anyway, I would like to say this. This is Richard Dawkins' latest book. I don't know if you can see it. It's called The Magic of Reality. I would say not only is it his latest book, I would say it's his very finest book. If you would get this book and read it, in fact, it would be even better, get it as I got it to begin with on CDs, the audio version. Get this book, invest in the audio version, then you can listen. There's 6 CDs, about an hour each. You can listen to them in your car. I've listened to them 8 or 10 times now, and I love it. You will learn so much about science and so much about how the world really works, what a rainbow really is, what an earthquake really is. You will learn that your 185 millionth great-grandfather was a fish. And he'll make you believe it, too. You say, oh, I didn't come from no monkey. Oh, yeah, you did, too, buddy. And it gets worse than that if you go back far enough. So read this book, and I'll tell you what you will do. All of you that have been listening to your preachers all your lives and scared to death, after you've read this book a couple of times, you'll say, you know something? That makes sense. That man makes a whole lot more sense than my preacher does. In fact, if you live in Rockingham County, you'll probably say, this book right here makes way yonder more sense than my preacher ever made, because he's going to explain things so simply you can understand them. Okay, I want to say another thing. I watch Johnny and James and Mark all the time. I never miss a broadcast. And unlike some people, I don't get up and go to the bathroom or eat a snack. I just watch them, study them, take notes on them. And this is the impression that I have of the Church of Christ preachers. They are kind of like plasterers. If you've ever seen, trying to find where I wrote, yeah. If you've ever seen the old guys that used to do plaster ceilings and plaster walls, they have a trowel and a bucket of plaster. These preachers, I know they mean well, but they're trying to plaster up the cracks in the Bible. Somebody calls in and says, well, what about the thief on the cross? It's always going to be a Baptist. He's going to call in and say, well, salvation by faith only. The thief on the cross, he didn't have to be baptized in water. He couldn't, because he wasn't going to get down off the cross and go to a pond. He didn't have time. He was going to be dead before then. So the Church of Christ plasters up that crack. And they said, well, no. He died before Jesus had died. Jesus promised him he'd go to paradise, and he died before Jesus had died and been reborn, so we weren't in the new dispensation yet. So they patched that up. I wanted to talk about the big bolt. How much time have I got, fellas? Okay, great. That might give me just enough time to talk about the big bolt. I watched a preacher from Texas named Steve Hetherington talking about his coming up here. He was saying he used to be a Methodist, and his father, who called into the show, is still a Methodist. And Steve said that he broke away from his dad over basically one thing, and that was the teaching of evolution. He said his dad believes in God, but he's come to believe that evolution is the engine which drives the progress of life. And he said, I had to make a choice. He said it was either the Bible and God making man right there in the creation, or things happening slowly, and I had to break away. It's tragic he's broken away from his dad. But I was talking about the big bolt. If you put a big bolt through your head and you smear some Loctite on it, Loctite is a gooey liquid like a glue. If you ride a motorcycle, you know Loctite, you tighten down that nut and it won't vibrate off out while you're out on the road. Put that Loctite on there and tighten that thing tightly. And what's written on that bolt? King James Bible. And nothing's going to help you. Thomas Edison said religion is all bunk. There's nothing to it. How many of you knew that Thomas Edison was an atheist? Well, he was. And he said, religion's all bunk, but they get to the kids before 6 years of age and scare them to death. And then most of them never recover. They go on with the rest of their life with that big bolt tightened in their head, and they can't think. They can think, reason in all sorts of areas, but when it runs up against that Bible, they want to go to heaven, so the Bible's got to be true. There's no getting through to them. Is my time up? Okay, well, okay, thank you.
Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Surber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Surber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
All right, thanks for staying with us, folks. And I want to respond to what Larry said about the video that I put up about Stalin. And I want to make sure that you realize tonight that what I'm doing is I'm also examining Richard Dawkins. And I want you to basically, you be the judge and you determine which one of us is the most trustworthy tonight. Am I the most trustworthy about giving you information about Richard Dawkins, or is Larry? Has Larry investigated Richard Dawkins as well as I have? And once you decide that, if you decide negatively that he hasn't really investigated Richard Dawkins, and that the things that I'm about to show you are going to demonstrate that, and his investigation also of Hitler is going to come into question as well. And at that point, I hope that you will say, you know what, maybe I need to investigate what does the Bible say a little bit closer. Take a listen to Richard Dawkins on the makeup of Hitler's mind.
Now, you are right when you say that aspects of what Hitler tried to do could be regarded as arising out of Darwinian natural selection. That's exactly why I said that I despise Darwinian natural selection as a motto for how we should live. I tried to say we should not live by Darwinian principles, but Darwinian principles explain how we got here and why we exist in the scientific sense.
Now, what you actually heard was Richard Dawkins describing, and if you want to see that full debate, it's called the Dawkins-Pell debate, and in it, Richard Dawkins just admitted that Hitler was not practicing Catholicism. Hitler was practicing Darwinian natural selection. Stalin was an atheist. He admits that. Larry admits it as well. So does Richard Dawkins. And Richard Dawkins says, as a result of that, what Hitler did, he said, that's why I'm on the trail always opposing Darwinian natural selection. He doesn't even believe in the natural selection, as many individuals claim that as Darwin actually taught it himself. And so that's why it's so important tonight that you make sure that you get your facts. The fact is, Hitler was not in a practicing Christian mode. He was in a Darwinian mode, trying to build an elitist race using the points that Darwin had come up with that actually Richard Dawkins does not use today. Now, as I say, I don't have time to play the whole Richard Dawkins diatribe, but I'm telling you where it is. It's the Pell-Dawkins debate, and you can watch it. Again tonight, here's what we're really dealing with. We're dealing with atheists telling us that there is no God. Here's your range of atheists. You have Stalin, you have individuals like Bob Lawson, you have Alfred Kinsey, And those are individuals that are telling you that the world would be better if they were actually the norm. Now, you notice I don't have Larry's picture up here because I don't want to put Larry with this particular group. I happen to believe that these are some very, very dangerous individuals in their own right, in a different way. But notice, they're saying the same thing in reality. They're saying no rules. Now, Larry is basically saying tonight that there are no rules, and you might say, well, I didn't hear him say that. And so what I'll do is I'll give you a chance to let him say it himself. Listen to first, we're going to listen to, let me go back here, we're going to listen to the first atheist, and that would be Bob Lawson. Listen to his basic world for you.
There's consequences for your actions.
Okay, what are they? And what standard are you using, Bob? You don't use the Bible, so what standard? There's no hell. What rules do you really get? How is it that you determine who's misbehaving? Would you tell the community that?
Well, that's an individual thing, isn't it, Johnny? Same as like which religion I go to.
It is.
You sat there and condemned. Let me ask you this. Did you preach a sermon one time that condemned because there was music at a funeral that you sent everybody to hell?
You didn't want to answer that question.
What's the question, Johnny?
The question was,
I get to determine what. I'm an individual. If you walk in my house, you're going to get hurt.
We're not talking about your house. We're talking about at the studio where you wished you to follow through and slap Charles.
Okay.
How do you determine what's wrong?
How does he determine?
I'm talking about you, Bob.
When you step over the line, Johnny, I'm a street man. When you step over the line, there's consequences.
Okay. There's your world when there is no God, there are no rules. Every man actually sets up his own system. Now, that was Bob Lawson. He says it's an individual thing. He gets to basically decide, and he's a street man, so you need to be careful with him. Now, I will say that Larry did not come over that way, but at the end of the day, you judge as to whether or not you want to live in either one of these worlds with either one of them in charge. Take a listen.
In the humanist world, here's my question. In the humanist world, does everyone get to be their own God? In other words, standard, they get to determine what's right and wrong? And if not, what is the standard of right and wrong?
Can I get over here, BC, in front of what you... in the humanist world, does everyone get to be their own God? No. The socialist, I like socialism, and you all hate it. In the socialist world where everybody, everybody can't afford to buy their own fire truck. So socialism says as a community we'll buy one fire truck, and then occasionally when somebody needs their house on fire, then that fire truck will be there for us. That's socialism. I asked my kids at school one time, what's socialism? They said, it's where the secret police kick your door down at night. They said they've been brainwashed by the capitalist system.
Now, again, what you're being told by Larry is that socialism is something that we might want to try over here. And a moment ago, he said that Hitler was a Catholic. But Richard Dawkins said Hitler was practicing Darwinian natural selection. And it may be the case that you might want to get on the internet and have a look at socialist countries that have actually taken this idea of everybody owns everything and really use that particular position. It doesn't work. Stalin was an individual who was trying to get the individuals all to take all of the common good and put it together for the good of the country, and we're all comrades. And guess what? Stalin was at the top of the tier. That's what always happens. You end up having someone who is smooth enough to talk you into putting all of your things together, pooling all of your things into one pool, and guess what? There isn't any system in place to keep people from cheating, and someone always does. And so my question tonight is, do you really want to go into socialism? Do you really want to take Larry Surber, even though he didn't say what Bob Lawson said? It ends up being the same thing. He said that every man isn't their own rule, but really it is the case. Every man ends up being their own God. And so this is an extremely important discussion, as I said. Now, as far as Larry, I want to be fair to him tonight, and I want to let you hear that he certainly is not for these individuals. He isn't for Stalin, nor is he for Kinsey. Take a listen. Or he isn't for Kinsey. Let's take a listen. We were talking before the cameras went on, and Larry was telling me about reading about Alfred Kinsey and the fact that you are now convinced that in fact it is true that Alfred Kinsey was involved in stimulating infants.
Pedophilia.
Okay, pedophilia. All right, so.
Yeah, but let me interrupt you one second. Okay. You said Penn State. I thought he was in Indiana.
It is. I'm sorry. What am I doing? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Penn State.
I'm it's a Freudian slip there. Yeah. All right. Now, Penn State is Joe Paterno.
Right.
All right. Indiana. Okay, so you did hear him, and I said I want to be fair. I want everybody to know that I'm not saying that Larry is for all these individuals. But here's the thing. If there is no God, and really every man is in fact not bound by any particular rules that come from a deity that has control over us, well, Kinsey, he gets to be his own God. Now, as far as being fair to Dawkins, I want to be fair to Dawkins as well. I'm fairly certain that I actually don't see the clip where I have Richard Dawkins saying that he is totally against Stalin, and that's understandable. But nevertheless, Stalin is an atheist, so you have that issue to deal with. Now, in the religious end, I am very clear that I'm opposed to all of the individuals that are probably on Larry's list. I'm opposed to the Catholic Church. I would have been opposed to Hitler before Hitler ever began to practice Darwinian natural selection, according to the man that Larry puts up as his idol. I mean, that's pretty solid information there from Dawkins. I was already against Hitler because he was a Catholic. I'm against the other religionists too. But the problem is, and this is the problem that we have in the world, I think this is why we have so many Larry Surbers in the world. I'm not speaking for him, but I'm just saying in a general way. It's because religious people won't disavow the other religious individuals. They continue to let them act in the fashion that they do, and they don't say anything about it. We want to say very clearly we're opposed to Catholicism, we're opposed to individuals who hold up the Bible on a regular basis, but then they don't follow it. And I certainly tonight want to make sure that you do judge that which one of us has actually given you information that's verifiable. I think that I have answered both times what he said about Richard Dawkins and whether you should read Richard Dawkins' book. Richard Dawkins doesn't even agree with Larry Surber what he said tonight, and I hope that you'll use that.
Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Surber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Surber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say that Johnny misrepresented Richard Dawkins. If he would play that back, he said Dawkins no longer believes in Darwinian natural selection. That's not what Richard Dawkins said. He said, I don't like people using natural selection as a way to live. He said, I still believe it is a scientific fact of the way life, organisms on Earth develop. Johnny also said he wanted you all to judge who was the biggest expert on Richard Dawkins, me or Johnny. All right. I've read every book Richard Dawkins wrote, from The Selfish Gene to The Blind Watchmaker to The Climbing Mount Improbable. I've read every interview he's ever given in Free Inquiry and Skeptical Inquiry magazine. I will happily submit in front of these cameras to a test. Get somebody to draw up a test on Richard Dawkins and let me take it and let Johnny take it. I believe you'll find out I will make a much higher score on the test. I have no doubt. I don't think Johnny has put 1/100th the time, probably not 1,000th the time into Richard Dawkins that I have. Okay, I don't know if you people saw on the Buzz, I think it was the Buzz, a few weeks ago, there was a guy named Stan Gravely. He calls himself Dr. Stan. He may be a doctor. I don't know his credentials. I kind of got the impression he was a doctor in the sense that Dr. Phil is a doctor. I don't know. But he was on there, and all of a sudden, Dr. Stan started taking off his wristwatch. He was going to pull a William Paley on me. I had called in. William Paley was a preacher, and in 1802, that's 210 years ago, 210 years ago, William Paley came up with the argument from design. And it goes like this. This is a simplified version of it. William Paley said, if I'm walking through the heath and I stumble across a fine pocket watch, and I pick it up and I don't know what it is, and I study it, I'm going to see that it was made for a purpose, that it was made to tell time. And I know that things like that don't just fall out of the sky or come to being like a rock or something. Somebody had to design that thing. And I certainly agree with that. Watches video cameras, laptop computers, chainsaws do not just come into being. But he went on to say, the human eye is much more complex than a fine pocket watch. It's designed for seeing. It didn't just happen. It had to have a designer and a creator. No, it didn't. The organic world is totally different from the world of artifacts made of metal, plastic, and glass. There's just absolutely no doubt about this. And even so, if Paley says complex things can't just happen, he doesn't explain who made God. God's the most complex thing in his world. So that doesn't get you anywhere. I think, as I said, this was 210 years ago in 1802. I couldn't believe Dr. Stan was taking his watch off about to pull that old argument from design on me. But let's just take an example. We go to another planet, and we land in our rocket ship, and we get out and we're walking around in our spacesuits, and we're looking for evidence of intelligent life. We find a gun. We examine it for a few minutes, and we see that clearly it's designed to shoot, maybe to kill. We don't have any problem realizing there must be intelligent life forms there. But what if we encounter a tree? Are we going to conclude then there's an intelligent life form there just because we see a tree? Organic things develop bit by bit without any intervention of a human designer or a God. That's what makes religion so silly to me. The God is so much like a man. We see ourselves making things. We've all seen people design and build a watch. We've never seen anything design and build an eye. And so when we see things and we say that it happens the way a man would do it, that's childish to me. Now, Johnny Robertson doesn't believe that complex things can come from simple things. And listen to this very closely, because this is important. Johnny Robertson doesn't believe in Darwinian evolution. He doesn't believe simple things can evolve into complex things just purely by the forces of blind nature. But I've got news for Johnny. He did it himself. Are you hearing me, Johnny? He did it himself. He was in his mother's womb, one cell, an egg. His father's sperm fertilized that egg. And from then on, he was on the way from going to a single cell to a zygote, a blastocyst, an embryo, a fetus, and finally a human with 1 trillion cells. 1 trillion of those cells that was on the screen earlier, that complex human cell. Johnny went from one cell to a full human in only 9 months. This is the way nature operates. Life has been on this earth for 3.5 billion years. Life has been on this earth for 3.5 billion years. For the first 3 billion years, it was all single-celled life. The amoeba, the paramecium, things that don't have to have a male and a female, things that give a wiggle and split right down the middle and become two. It was only in the last 500 million years, or 500 million years, that the cells began to combine along certain patterns, certain templates that only the laws of nature only allow. It's not like an explosion. Like I say, you blow up bricks, they don't land and become a house. But things in nature do follow a pattern. And so for the last 3 billion years, it was one-celled life. Only the last 500 million years have we had more complex organisms. And I think that is amazingly important. Very, very, very important. Okay, I would like to say this. The oldest writing that we know is long before the Jews wrote the books of Moses in the Old Testament. It comes from the Sumerian people who lived in Mesopotamia. The oldest writing are the myths of Gilgamesh, back 6,000 to 6,500 years ago. And they had a myth about a guy named Utnapishtim. And the gods, they had many gods, not just one god like the Jews, but the gods were very angry at the humans they had made because they made so much noise. So they decided to flood the earth and destroy all the humans except this guy Utnapishtim. He was told to build a boat, and a very big boat, because he was also told to take the seed of every living thing on board with him. The gods sent down the flood, destroyed everybody on earth except Utnapishtim and his boat. And then when the water subsided, he sent out some birds. He sent out a dove, and he sent out a sparrow, and then he finally sent out a raven that didn't come back, so he felt like there was land. One of the gods put a bow in the air, a rainbow. Well, there's a myth there. That's how the Sumerian people in Mesopotamia said the rainbow came to be. And of course, the Jews just plagiarized that. They stole that from them. What is a rainbow, really? The greatest scientist who ever lived, in my opinion, was Sir Isaac Newton. He lived from 1642 to 1727. He discovered that white light from the sun contains a spectrum, an electromagnetic spectrum, a rainbow, if you will. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And what happens when you run light through a prism, which is a little triangular chunk of glass, it breaks the light into that spectrum. That's what a rainbow really is. If you are standing with the sun behind you, the raindrops are around. The light goes in, and like a parabolic mirror, it puts the light back out, breaks it into the different wavelengths. Just like when you stick a pole in the water, it looks broken. That's refraction. Well, those raindrops refract the white light and break it into the rainbow. That's what a rainbow really is. A rainbow is not something that a god puts up there. And you know, with all these myths of rainbows and other things, I wish Scotty would put up this picture that he took a freeze frame on earlier. This is a dust mite. Your house is full of these things. And isn't it funny that the Jews and the other ancient people never had any myths about them? They didn't know they existed. Thank you.
Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Surber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Surber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
Now, tonight, folks,